You know, sometimes it just takes the smallest thing to bring back a whole lifetime. This morning, I opened the window, just a crack, and the breeze carried in the smell of someone baking and apple pie. Cinnamon, nutmeg, sugar caramelizing, just so. Land sakes alive, I hadn't even had my coffee yet, and there I was, standing in my kitchen, staring at that window like it was a time machine. And suddenly, I wasn't 84 years old anymore. I was 21, hair all pinned up, apron covered in flour. Frank, my husband, bless his soul, sitting at the kitchen table, reading the Gazette like it was the Holy Bible. And me, standing there with a pie in the oven and something stirring in my heart that I couldn't quite name back then. That smell, that pie, it always brings me back to that night. And I'll tell you what, I didn't know it then, but that night would change everything. I don't usually talk much about this, not out loud anyway, but these days, with the way the world's been carrying on, the shouting on the news, folks angry with each other over every little thing, I've been thinking more and more about the things that held me together through all those hard years. It ain't politics or money, I'll tell you that much. No, what kept me whole were people. Ordinary folks doing something kind when no one was watching. A neighbor bringing over soup in a snowstorm. A stranger holding your hand in a hospital. A boy then can you 20 years after you gave him a book he didn't think he deserved. I've lived through wars, through loss and quiet heartbreak. I've seen shelves empty during the pandemic and faces disappear behind masks. And yet, I still believe in people. Don't ask me how, I just do. And I've been carrying that belief like an old coin in my pocket, worn smooth over the years. But lately, something in me says it's time to take it out and show it to somebody. Maybe you. Maybe that's why you're here. I don't pretend to have all the answers. Lord have mercy, no. But I do have stories. Real ones. Ones that still sit on my chest some nights when the house is too quiet. Stories about moments. Small, almost invisible things that turned out to be not so small after all. I want to tell you about the night my brother's letter came from Vietnam, and how a boy I didn't know gave me hope. I want to tell you about the winter Mrs. Junie and I finally stopped pretending to hate each other. And the hospital room where Frank and I said goodbye, and someone left a piece of chocolate and a note that I still keep in my Bible. I've kept these memories like old postcards tucked in drawers, not forgotten, just waiting. So maybe today's the day I dust them off and lay them out for you. You young folks might not understand all of it, that's all right. But maybe you'll feel it. The way a pie in the oven can hold a whole marriage. Or how a library card can save a boy's whole future. Maybe by the end, you'll see what I mean. Why I still believe, after everything. So, if you've got a few minutes, pour yourself a cup of something warm. I've got stories to tell. And I promise, they're not about perfect people. But they're about real ones. People like you. People like me. People who made me believe. Now, you tell me, what's the one moment you've never told anyone about? The one that made you believe people can be good? Back in my day, and I mean way back, sugar, the world was a whole lot smaller. Or maybe I was just small in it. Either way, it felt like everything worth knowing fit right inside our little house on the corner of Maple and 3rd. Next to the church with the squeaky bell and across from the feed store where Daddy used to get his tobacco and talk corn prices with the other men. I was just a girl then, maybe 6 or 7, hair in braids, knees always scraped, freckles splashed across my cheeks like someone dotted me with a pepper shaker. Life was hard, but you didn't know it was hard when you were in it. We didn't have much. Lord knows we didn't have a pot to pee in, as Mama used to say, though she'd whisper it under her breath if the preacher was nearby. Daddy had died in the war, the big one, World War II, and Mama raised me and my brother Tommy on canned beans, homemade quilts, and a whole lot of faith. She was a quiet woman, worn at the edges like a favorite apron, but when she looked at you, you felt seen. We made do with what we had. Sundays were for church, and Sundays after church were for pie, and you didn't dare mess with that order. I remember sitting on our front porch in my little cotton dress, swinging my legs, listening to the hum of locusts and the low whistle of the train in the distance, and I'd think, this is it. This is all there is, and it's enough. I used to believe people were good because that's all I saw. Neighbors leaving eggs on your porch when your hens stopped playing. Mama mending a dress for Miss Patty down the street, even when her own hands were tired. Tommy holding my hand when the storm sirens went off and I thought the sky was about to fall. I thought kindness was just how folks were, and I believed, with every beat of my little heart, that people always came back. That Daddy would walk through that door Sunday, muddy boots and all, saying he missed Mama's meatloaf. That no one really left for good. I was wrong about that part, but I wasn't wrong about people. Not entirely. I remember this one afternoon, golden, sticky summer light spilling over the porch steps, when Miss Thelma next door called me over. She'd just baked peach cobbler, said she had more than a body could eat, which was her way of pretending she wasn't just being kind. I sat at her table with a chipped plate and a big scoop of cobbler and thought I was the luckiest girl in the whole state of Iowa. She asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. I told her, a teacher, or maybe a singer, or maybe just someone who stays. She looked at me real long then, with that soft smile only older folks seem to have, and said, "Well, darlin', you've already got the heart for all three." Funny the things that stick with you. Not the big birthdays or the report cards, but the way someone spoke to you when you didn't think you mattered much. Those little things, they plant seeds. And even if the world's been stormy, somehow they still bloom. So yes, I was just a girl then. But I was learning. Not from books, those came later, but from glances, gestures, from how Mama smoothed my blanket at night even when she was dead tired, from how people cared when they didn't have to. I suppose that's when the belief started. Not in fairy tales, I never was one for glass slippers, but in people, in their hands, in the way they show up when you need 'em, even if they never say a word. That's the part one carried with me. Still do. Even now. You ever think about that? Who planted your seeds? It happened on a Tuesday of all days. Not a special one. Not a holiday or a birthday. Just a plain, regular Tuesday in late September when the sky starts looking like buttermilk and the corn's so tall you feel like you're walking through cathedrals made of gold. I was 18, fresh out of high school, helping at the library part-time and spending the rest of my days pretending I had it all figured out. I wore my hair in a neat little twist back then, tried to look more grown than I felt, and I kept a notebook in my purse where I scribbled poems I never showed a soul. I still believed the world had a rhythm, like the clicking of typewriter keys, and if I just listened close enough, I could write my way into it. That day, I was carrying a box of books out the back of the library, old westerns and dusty encyclopedias no one touched in years, when I nearly dropped the whole thing right at my feet. Because standing there, with one foot on the loading dock and the other on the gravel, was a boy I didn't know. Mud on his boots, sleeves rolled up, hair too long for the church ladies to approve of, and the bluest eyes I'd ever seen outside of a paint catalog. He looked at me like he'd just remembered something important, not like he'd seen me before, but like he'd been expecting me. I'll tell you what, my heart did something strange. Not like thunder, not like lightning, more like a slow tug, like something was moving inside me, and I didn't know whether to run or stand real still. "Need a hand?" he asked, and his voice was deep and quiet like the bottom of a well. I nodded, couldn't trust myself to speak just then. We stacked the books together in the back room, and when he left, I found a slip of paper on top of the Louis L'Amour hardbacks. It said, in neat pencil, "The sky was low and the wind was mean, but I saw her there in faded green." No name, just that. A few lines of poetry. And I swear I didn't breathe for a whole minute. Turns out his name was Frank. He worked on his daddy's farm just outside of town. Drove an old Chevy that rattled like bones in a coffee can. He came back to the library the next day. Said he needed a book on irrigation, but I think we both knew he didn't. Every week after that, he'd leave me a line. Tucked inside returned books. Scribbled on checkout slips. Always quiet, always looking a little surprised I was still there. And me, well, I didn't know what to make of it. I'd never had a boy write me anything that wasn't a joke or a dare. But Frank, he wasn't trying to impress anyone. He just noticed things. How the light hit the carpet in the reading room. How I smiled when I stamped the due date crooked. He paid attention, not in a loud way. In a slow, sure way, like rain filling up a dry well. And I guess that's what it was. The beginning of something I didn't have a name for. Not yet. I didn't know it then, but I'd go on to marry that boy. Bury him, too, many years later. But that first Tuesday, that plain, nothing special Tuesday, was when everything shifted. I didn't see it coming. I just knew, deep down in my bones, that something had changed. My hands were still the same. My name hadn't changed, but inside, I felt different. Like I was waking up to a part of myself I didn't even know was sleeping. You ever had a moment like that? One where the world was still, but you weren't? Where someone walked in and you just knew? I suppose there's no real way to prepare for that kind of silence. The kind that hums in your ears and settles in your chest like a stone. We were young, too young, maybe just married the summer before, and I was as wide-eyed and hopeful as a girl could be. Frank had just built us a porch swing, and I'd started knitting little socks even though I didn't know how to finish a pair proper. The nursery smelled like fresh paint and baby powder, and every morning I'd sit in there, hand on my belly, humming lullabies to someone I hadn't met yet. Lord, we had plans, and names, and dreams folded into dresser drawers like clean blankets. But not all stories end the way you think they will. The baby came too early. They called it a complication, but what it really was heartbreak. One long night and then silence. No cry. No tiny fingers wrapped around mine. Just a nurse with kind eyes and a clipboard, and Frank squeezing my hand so hard it went numb. I remember lying there, numb from the waist down and more broken than I'd ever been in my life, staring at the ceiling tiles that looked like puzzle pieces I couldn't put together. I didn't cry, not at first. I just felt hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides and left an echo behind. And here's the thing no one tells you. When you lose something like that, people stop looking you in the eye. They mean well, they do. But they don't know what to say, so they say nothing. Or worse, they say too much. God's plan, they whisper. You'll try again. But I didn't want to try again. I wanted her. I'd named her Rose. Never told anyone but Frank. And that name, it just sat in my mouth like a stone. Heavy, sharp. I felt shame. Isn't that strange? Like I'd failed at something my body was supposed to do. And anger too, quiet, simmering anger. At the world. At God. At my own body. Even at Frank sometimes, for not crying the way I thought he should. But he was grieving in his own way. Poor thing. Fixing things. Quiet. Always fixin'. The hardest part was the quiet when we got home. Her room, just sitting there, untouched. The little socks still in the basket. I couldn't go in for weeks. Maybe months. I stopped singing. I stopped writing. I stopped believing, if I'm honest. And the folks at church, they prayed, bless them. But I didn't want prayers. I wanted someone to say, this is unfair. And it's okay to be angry. But nobody did. Except Miss Junie, of all people. The same Miss Junie I'd once rolled my eyes at for being nosy and too loud at the town hall meetings. One day, she showed up on our porch with a pie, didn't even say hello, just put it down and sat beside me. Didn't talk. Just sat. After a while, she said, I lost my first two. Then she reached into her purse and handed me a tiny hand-knitted blanket, soft pink and white. Made this for her, she said. But she never used it. Maybe a rose would like it. That's when I broke. Full, guttural sobs that made me shake. And she just held me, rockin' slow like a lullaby without music. I'll never forget that. The world didn't make sense and nothing could fix what happened, but for that one moment, I didn't feel so alone. That's when I learned real kindness doesn't need words. And sometimes, the people you least expect are the ones who show up when it counts. You ever had someone sit beside your silence and not try to fix it? I remember how the clock stopped ticking. Not really, I suppose, but in my memory it did. Just stopped. Like the world decided to hold its breath for a minute so I could hear my own heart breaking. It was a gray October morning. The kind where the light doesn't quite wake up and the coffee stays warm too long because no one's drinking it. Frank had been sick for months by then. The doctors said lymphoma. A quiet, cruel thing, the way it crept in. He never complained, not once. Not even when the pain got sharp or when he couldn't get out of bed on his own. That was just the kind of man he was. Quiet strength. Still water. But I saw it. I saw how tired his eyes got. How his hands, those strong farmer hands that used to toss hay bales like pillows, started shaking when he tried to hold a pen. He stopped writing me poems, and that's when I knew. He was letting go. I tried to stay strong, Lord knows I did, but when you love someone like that, someone who's stitched into the fabric of your everyday, there's no way to prepare for the unraveling. That morning, I sat beside him in the hospital room. Sterile. Still. The machines beeping soft, like they were whispering secrets to each other. I held his hand, bones under skin, and I remember saying, Frank, you can rest now. He didn't answer. Just looked at me, that long, slow look he'd given me all those years ago behind the library, the first time he handed me a poem and didn't wait to see me read it. Then, his breathing slowed. The nurse came in, touched my shoulder, and I swear that's when the clock stopped. Just for a second. Just long enough for the world to change without a skin permission. And I sat there. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just stared at his face, trying to memorize it. As if I hadn't already traced it in my sleep for 40 years. You lose someone like that, it doesn't hit all at once. It comes in waves. The empty coffee mug, the smell of his flannel shirt hanging behind the door. The way no one says your name the same ever again. I felt lost. Not just sad, lost. Like the map I'd followed my whole life had been burned up overnight. I could meet. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't pray. I just sat in his chair, staring out the window, waiting for. I don't know what. But then, and I'll never forget this, a nurse came back in. Young girl. Sweet smile. She handed me a small envelope. He asked me to give this to you, she said. Said not to open it until he was gone. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside, just 4 lines, scribbled in his crooked hand. If words could hold you, I'd never let go. But love isn't paper, it's something that grows. Even when breath leaves, I'll still be near. Just look for me, Ellen. I'll always be here. And Lord have mercy. I fell apart, right there in that hospital chair. Finally, the tears came, not quiet ones, not tidy, but real, heavy, clean sin. He gave me a goodbye I didn't know I needed. And somehow that note, that last poem, reminded me I wasn't alone. That love doesn't end. It just changes shape. Sometimes it lives in a flannel shirt. Sometimes in a slip of paper tucked in your Bible. Sometimes in a nurse's soft voice or a stranger's gentle touch on your shoulder. That's the moment I understood something. Grief and love, they're two sides of the same coin. And the deeper the grief, the more beautiful the love must have been. You ever lose someone like that? Someone who took a piece of you with but somehow left a part of themselves behind? The house got quieter after Frank passed. Not just silent, quieter. There's a difference. Silence is the absence of sound. But quiet is a presence all its own. It fills corners. It sits at the dinner table. It watches you when you're not looking. I remember waking up the first morning without him, sunlight spilling across the pillow where his head used to rest, and thinking, well, I guess this is the beginning of something else. But I didn't know what that else was. Days stretched long. I went through the motions, brushed my hair, folded laundry, answered the phone when folks called to check in, though what they were checking for I'm not sure. Maybe to see if I was still breathing. Maybe I wasn't. Not really. Grief, you see, ain't always loud. Sometimes it's a slow drift. You don't cry every day. You just disappear in pieces. I stopped going to church. Couldn't bear the hymns without him humming off-key beside me. Stopped cooking full meals. What's the point of mashed potatoes when no one's a skin 4 seconds? I sat in his chair most evenings, wrapped in the cardigan he always left hanging on the hook by the door. Sometimes I'd imagine he'd walk in, say he forgot his wallet, ask what was for supper. I knew better. But grief does strange things to time. It lets you pretend, just for a minute, that the world hasn't shifted under your feet. The neighbors meant well. Lord love 'em, they tried. Brought casseroles. Sent cards. One even brought me a plan I didn't know how to take care of. It died within a week. I stared at that brown leaf thing and thought, that about sums it up. I'd lost more than a husband. I'd lost the rhythm of my days. The little rituals that make life feel like life. Morning coffee for 2. Newspaper folded just so. His way of tapping his fingers on the kitchen table when he was thinking. All gone. And with it, a part of me. I didn't feel like myself anymore. And I wasn't. I was the version of me after. And let me tell you, that version didn't trust the world the way she used to. I'd spent a lifetime believing in people, in good intentions, in porch light promises and Sunday smiles. But when the one person who always showed up was suddenly gone, I couldn't help but wonder, what if no one else ever does? The house felt too big, the bed too cold. I stopped writing. The poems dried up like a well that had forgotten rain. I remember sitting by the window one night, watching the snow fall, and whispering, if you can hear me, Frank, I need a reason to stay soft. 'Cause I could feel it, the hardness settling in like frost on old glass. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Just tired. Worn thin. The kind of tired you don't sleep off. And yet, even in that stillness, the world kept spinning. Mail kept coming. The birds kept singing come spring. And somewhere in the middle of all that emptiness, I started to notice small things again. A robin landing on the windowsill. The sound of kids logging on their way home from school. I didn't feel joy, not quite, but I felt present. And that was something. You ever come out the other side of something and not recognize the person in the mirror? That was me. Still breathing. Still here. But changed. Not broken, exactly. Just rearranged. It started with a knock. Not loud, just two soft taps on the front door, like whoever was on the other side wasn't sure they belonged there. It was early March, and the snow hadn't quite melted yet. The kind of weather where your breath still lingers in the air like ghosts. I wasn't expecting anyone. I almost didn't answer. Lord knows I'd gotten good at pretending I wasn't home, but something made me open the door. And there he was. A boy. Couldn't have been more than 10. Thin, quiet, cheeks red from the wind, backpack half unzipped with a broken strap dangling like a loose tooth. I recognized him, sort of. He lived a few streets over, near the trailer park. His name was Travis, I think. I'd seen him at the library once or twice before the world shut down. He just looked up at me and said, "They said you used to have books." No hello, no introduction. Just that. They probably meant the older kids who remembered me from when the library was still open and I was still Miss Ellen behind the desk with a mug of tea and 1,000 stories. I blinked. "I still do," I said, coming out of the cold. He hesitated, then stepped inside, shy, like a stray cat that hasn't decided if you're safe yet. His shoes were wet. He didn't say much. Just stood there, holding the edges of his backpack like it was the only thing holding him together. I made him some cocoa, the kind with the little marshmallows that come out of the bag already stale, and we sat at the kitchen table while he told me, in short bursts, about how school was hard and home wasn't much easier. His mama worked nights. His uncle yelled too much. He liked to read, he said. "Helps me forget." Lord, those words. Helps me forget. That's when I felt something shifting in me. Like a small light clicking on in a room I hadn't been in for a long time. I got up, walked slow down the hall to the spare room, the one that used to be Frank's little study, now just a quiet place full of boxes, and came back with a worn copy of Charlotte's Web. I laid it on the table between us. "This one saved me once," I said. "I think it might help you too." He opened it right there and started reading, not out loud, just with his eyes moving across the page like he'd been thirsty for words. And I just watched him, this small, serious boy with tired eyes. And I thought, maybe this is what I'm here for now. Not to go back to what was, but to give forward. The next week, he came back, brought the book with him, said he read it twice. I gave him another, and then another, and soon I found myself opening the front room like a tiny, unofficial library. Old shelves, paperbacks, a pot of cocoa on the stove. Word got around. A few more kids came. Some mamas dropped by. One even left me a note that said, "Thank you for remembering our children." And just like that, I started remembering myself. Not the woman who lost, but the woman who gave. The woman who still could. Funny how hope doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it walks up to your porch with wet socks and a broken zipper, a skin for a book. And sometimes all it takes is giving someone something small, a story, a chair at the table, a cup of cocoa, to remember that you still have something to give. You ever feel like life gave you a second chance, and it didn't look like you thought it would? It had been sitting in the back of my closet for years, hanging on a wire hanger, half covered in an old pillowcase to keep the dust off. The blue dress. Not fancy. Just simple cotton, faded at the seams, with little white flowers and a missing button on the sleeve. I wore it the day we buried Rose. And after that, I never could bring myself to throw it out. It wasn't just a dress. It was a memory stitched into fabric. It was pain you could fold. Sometimes I'd open the closet and just look at it, like it might tell me something. Like maybe if I stared long enough, I could go back. But of course, that's not how time works. Time doesn't ask permission. It just moves. And somewhere between one March and the next, I realized I hadn't looked at the dress in months. Life had crept in slow, soft, like sunrise through lace curtains. Travis kept coming by. More kids showed up with curious eyes and 2 big backpacks. I started keeping fresh cookies in the tin again. Found myself humming when I did the dishes. One afternoon, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, and I smiled. Not big, not showy, but real. And I realized I hadn't seen her, that woman in the mirror, in a long, long time. That night, I pulled the dress down from the closet, sat with it in my lap, ran my fingers over the fabric like I was touching an old friend. I thought about that day, about how young I was, how broken I felt, how I believed I'd never smile again. I cried, not the loud kind, the kind that slips out slow, like rain from a full gutter. And then I stood up, walked out to the back porch, and I lit the fire pit Frank built with his own hands 20 years ago. I laid the dress inside, watched the flames take it, slow, gentle, like the past letting go of itself. I whispered, thank you, not just to the dress, but to the girl I used to be. The one who carried that grief like a suitcase with a broken handle. The one who stayed soft, even when the world told her to harden. And then I whispered, it's time. That was the night I chose. Not happiness, no, that comes and goes like weather. I chose life, with all its mess, with all its ache and beauty and unanswered questions. I chose to stop counting what I'd lost and start watering what was still growing. I chose to forgive myself mostly for all the ways I thought I should have been stronger, quicker to heal, better at moving on. That's the lie they don't tell you. There's no right way to carry sorrow. There's just carrying it. And some days it's heavier than others. But that night, as the last of the fabric turned to ash, I felt light. Not free of grief, but full of grace. I didn't need the past to go away. I just needed to stop letting it run the show. You ever hold on to something so long, you forget what your hands feel like empty? That was me. And when I let go, I found room to hold new things. A child's laughter, the smell of cinnamon again, my own voice singing along to the radio. I'm still me, but more than I was, not less. And that's the miracle of living. You bend, you break, but you come back different. And sometimes stronger, sometimes softer, but always, always more real. You ever let go of something you thought you needed and found yourself instead? You know, I've had a long time to think about what really matters. Not just in the sweet, shiny moments, but in the long, quiet ones too, the ones nobody writes songs about. I've sat with ghosts at the kitchen table. I've folded memories into the same old laundry basket, week after week. And somewhere between holding on and learning to let go, I found something I didn't expect. Peace. Not the kind that comes from getting what you want, but the kind that comes from understanding why you didn't. I used to think life was made of big moments, weddings, funerals, births, goodbyes. But I was wrong. It's the in-betweens. It's the nights when someone calls just to ask how you're doing. It's the pie you bring to a neighbor, even when your own heart's a little cracked. It's showing up, over and over again. That's what stays with you. That's what builds a life. I look back now, and I see a girl who thought kindness was the default setting of the world, and maybe it still is, underneath all the noise. But I also see a woman who had every reason to stop believing in people, and didn't. Not because it was easy. Lord, no. But because the only thing harder than huttin' is hittin' alone. And I never truly was. Not when Frank held my hand in the dark. Not when Miss Junie brought over that pie and let me break in her arms. Not when that boy with the torn backpack looked me in the eyes and asked for a sorry, and unknowingly gave me back my own. I've learned that most people are just trying. stumbling through their own storms. Some do harm, yes, but more often than not, they help quietly, without a witness. And sometimes, they save you without even knowing it. So here's what I want to say, if you're listening. Don't wait for your life to get easier to start living it. Don't hold your breath for the perfect moment to be kind, or brave, or soft again. That perfect moment, it's not coming. But the real ones, the messy, beautiful, ordinary ones, they're passing by every day. Grab one, hold it, share it. I used to sit by that window, waiting for something to change, thinking maybe if I just stayed still long enough, the ache would stop. But it never did. It just softened, and I started moving again, slow, unsure, but forward. And I think maybe it's time you did too. Maybe it's time you stop waiting for a sign, for an apology, for the hurt to stop. Maybe it's time you got up, walked outside, and looked someone in the eye. Maybe it's time you forgave yourself, or called someone who's been waiting, or finally said what you needed to say. You don't have to be whole to begin. You just have to begin. That's what I learned. That's what I know. And maybe, just maybe, that's what you needed to hear today. So, that's my story, or part of it, anyway. I reckon I've lived long enough to know that a life isn't a straight line. It's more like a patchwork quilt. Some pieces bright, some dark, some that don't make much sense until you step back and see how they're all stitched together. And if you've made it this far with me, well, bless your heart. You've got a patient soul. I didn't tell you all this to make you cry, or feel sorry, or even to inspire you. Though if it did, I'm mighty glad. I told you because I believe stories are bridges. Between then and now. Between you and me. Between who we were and who we still might become. And this one, mine, it ain't really just about grief or love or losing someone who wrote poems on checkout slips. It's about what's left. What stays, what grows back. Because even now, sitting here with the sound of the wind through the cornfields and my tea gone cold, I still believe in people, in second chances, in the strange and beautiful way a heart can break and still beat softer, better. I believe that even after everything, there's still goodness in the world. You might have to squint to see it sometimes, I'll grant you that. But it's there, in a child's skin for a story, in a neighbor knocking just to see how you're holding up, in the boy who picks up your glove off the sidewalk and says nothing, just smiles. You know, folks talk a lot these days about how the world's fallen apart, about how people changed, but I've lived long enough to tell you this. People haven't changed as much as we think. We're still made of the same stuff, the same need for connection, for comfort, for someone to look us in the eye and say, you matter. That's all most of us want. To be seen, to be known, even just a little. So let me ask you, since I've done all the talking today, what is it you believe in, deep down when it's quiet? When there's no one to impress? No one watching? Is there someone you haven't forgiven yet? Someone you miss but haven't said it out loud? Maybe even someone you're afraid to become? Maybe it's time to pick up the phone, or write the letter, or open the window and let a little air in again. You don't need a big reason. Sometimes, breathing is reason enough. And if you're waiting for life to feel fair before you begin living it, honey, you might wait forever. Don't let grief write the rest of your story. Let it teach you something. Yes, but don't let it hold the pen. I may be an old woman now, but I'm still learning, still growing, still listening for small signs that love isn't gone, just change clothes. And sometimes when the wind moves just right across the porch, and the light hits the wall the way it used to at dusk, I close my eyes and I swear I hear him. Frank, that low hum, that same off-key whistle, and I think to myself, maybe he is still here. Maybe we don't ever really lose the ones we love. Maybe they just become part of how we love others, part of how we keep going. What do you think? Do you believe that true love finds a way back? That kindness comes full circle? That maybe, just maybe, the world's still worth trusting, even when it lets you down? I hope so. I truly do. Because I've seen enough to know. Sometimes, even after everything, people surprise you. And if you're lucky, sometimes you surprise yourself.